Cat 1. Clara, a second-year magic student and one of Yennekar's best friends, had been standing outside the half-destroyed Ophelis Hall since morning. That was because there was someone that she wanted to meet with. "Hello, Ms. Belle." Quote, "A day has passed since the major destruction caused by the occupation of Ophelis Hall had come to an end. Although the detailed investigation had yet to be completed, amongst the students there were rumors that the maids were somehow involved with the incident." Clara had felt that the rumors were nothing more than that, mere rumors. The school's inspection department would eventually come to a conclusion after discovering more details. Gasp. Quote, "The reconstruction site of the half-destroyed Ophelis Hall. Since it had barely been 2 days since the incident, no sort of significant reconstruction work had been started. The faculty and maids were busy trying to figure out the extent of the damage." At the entrance of the Rose Garden, she ran into Belle Maya. She was busy taking notes. Clara let out a gasp. Ads by PubFuture. Belle Maya, unlike usual, was wearing a dark red maid outfit covered in beautiful decorations. Looking at the blue rose brooch on her chest, the blue frills that came down the hem of her skirt, it was definitely the outfit that only the head maid was permitted to wear. "Aren't you a close friend of Lady Yennekar? What brings you all the way to Ophelis Hall?" "Oh, hello, Ms. Belle. Did you recently get promoted?" Due to Ms. Alice's personal circumstances, she was no longer able to fulfill her duty as the head maid. As such, I have been promoted from a senior maid to the head maid." I see. It somehow feels like your position is much higher. There is no reason to feel uncomfortable. Our main duty is to help others. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to let me know." Quote, "No, it's okay. It's just that I wanted to talk to you about a personal matter. How should I say this? Never mind, you look quite busy right now." Quote, I am a bit busy, but..." Belle looked down at her checklist, then glanced back at the half-destroyed Ophelis Hall before shaking her head. "Most of the work has already been done, and I don't think I'll need to give out any further orders. I was going to take a break anyway." Quote, "Oh, is that so? So, what was it that you wanted to talk about? Don't be too surprised. This is top secret. You can never leak this out, and you can't act too surprised." Quote, Clara's face stiffened as she leaned in towards Belle with a serious tone to her voice. Belle wondered just what kind of shocking secret she was about to tell her as she paid close attention. "It's about Yennekar. I think she likes Ed Rothstaylor." Quote, having already known that fact to a surprising degree, she wondered if she should at least pretend to be surprised. "I just don't get why someone like Yennekar would fall so madly in love with that thug, and as her friend, my feelings are mixed." Quote, they had moved over to a bench in the Rose Garden. Clara, who kept on looking around nearby to make sure that nobody was passing by, soon confessed all of the troubles buried deep in her heart to Belle. "I've been thinking about this for 3 days and nights already, but, these days, Ed's reputation has improved a bit. I'm sure Yennekar also has something on her mind, so I came to the decision to cheer them on. But I still feel very, very uncertain about it all." Quote, as she listened to every word Clara lamented, Belle thought that Yennekar had truly made a great friend. That was because in this world, there are very few people who would truly care for their friends' relationships to that extent. Even though she could have easily ended up interfering in something that was none of her business, Clara made sure to not cross that line and only worried about Yennekar's love life. First off, if Yennekar really thinks of him like that, then as her friend, I really do hope that Yennekar and Ed work out well. Quote, I see. You must have been very worried about her, Lady Clara. Quote, but that's not the point. Belle tilted her head. Right as she was going to respond, Clara interrupted, spitting out another girl's name. Lortel Cahaland. You know that name, right? You must, because you were a senior maid at Ophelis Hall. Yes, of course I know of her. Quote, recently, Yennekar has been saying her name quite often. Even though she's a first year, ever since the joint combat practice she has been involved with them quite a bit. Though, it doesn't seem like anything is happening. Quote, Clara looked around nearby once more, before quietly lowering her voice and whispering to Belle. So I looked into it personally, and I'm not sure, but they were both absent on the day of the opening ceremony. They were also together yesterday, during their shared first period. Thinking about Yennecar, it seems that she's in quite a pickle. Quote, for a girl, the existence of a rival was like a disaster. At first she thought that she may have just had a simple misunderstanding. Ms. Belle, I've heard a lot about you from Yennecar. She said that she relied on you quite a bit and you always gave her helpful advice. I heard that you are quite an insightful person. Quote, you're flattering me. Quote, and you also know both Yennecar and Lortel quite well, so I came here because I wanted to ask for your opinion. Quote, Lady Lortel is quite a famous person. I'm sure that you also know of her, don't you? Rumors about the Golden Daughter Lortel were spreading throughout the school, regardless of the grade. I know of her. But seeing just a bit of her, I just can't see Yennecar winning. I think that Lady Yennecar is a person that is also plenty attractive. Quote, of course I also think that, too. But Lortel is like, Clara's words didn't come out, but Belle nodded her head. Indeed, Lortel Cahaland is definitely a fox-like girl. She is always well behaved and her actions were full of grace. But when an opportunity struck, she was like a little devil that couldn't hide her true, dark feelings. Clara knew that quite well. Her life as a merchant didn't go to waste, so surely she had a better understanding of how to develop relationships and gain the interest of others. I don't have much relationship experience, but, ultimately, relationships between men and women are a game of push and pull. Belle had no choice but to nod her head at Clara's complaining. Yennecar Pilarover was innocent and positive by nature, so she only knew how to pull and not push. Lortel, on the other hand, being a merchant, there was no way that she wouldn't be completely capable of controlling the speed of a relationship's growth. No matter how attractive and lovable Yennecar might be, in front of Lortel's skilled tug-of-war she couldn't do anything, she was like a fish on a line. Clara clenched her fist. That can't happen. That's why, I think Yennecar should learn how to play hard to get. Quote ellipsis ellipsis quote, no matter what, I really want Yennecar to learn how to do that. It'll be too painful for her to lose a relationship because of adult charm from a girl a year younger than her. At least she will have gone through a learning experience if she gets rejected by that awful guy instead, but to be robbed of a relationship will only hurt. Belle wanted to applaud Clara, who was passionately expressing her frustration, but she refrained from reacting. To cry to such an extent, worrying about a friend's life. What do you think, Ms. Belle? I heard that you always say the right thing. Those burning eyes of hers turned towards Belle. Honestly, it was a bit awkward. Who can say? I'm really not quite sure. In any case, Belle was already acquainted with Ed, Yennecar, and Lortel. Compared to Clara, who is somewhat biased, she could judge the situation a bit more objectively. I don't think that there is a reason for Lady Yennecar to have to say something that doesn't suit her. Quote, you think so, and your thoughts could be perceived as a bit biased as well, right? I think that it's possible that Lady Yennecar is quite a bit more capable than you think, and Lady Lortel could also be less experienced in human relationships than expected, as well. Quote, I'm not sure, it's hard to agree with that part. Anyway, it wasn't a good idea to unnecessarily meddle in other people's love affairs. That was the conclusion Belle had come to, so she had no intention of supporting the extremely worried Clara's objective. In the first place, I don't even know much about Ed Rothstaylor. Is he just a ridiculously stubborn person, or was he just born an unpleasant jerk? In the end, Clara's hostility all ended up being directed towards Ed Rothstaylor. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous that she keeps looking at him like that, but he doesn't even realize it. Well, for young Master Ed's case, rather than being a stubborn person or a complete jerk, I think it's just because he's in a situation where it's difficult to have an interest in a relationship. Ed Rothstaylor was someone who had set up a camp in the northern forest, taking care of food, shelter, and clothing all by himself. Sometimes Belle would come by to give him some food ingredients, herbs and other medical supplies, but Ed had been taking care of the bare fundamentals of survival entirely on his own. In addition to that, he was also studying the academy's curriculum. He was living a life where he had to strategically divide each hour of the day into a task. He was in a spot where getting distracted by a woman for even a few days risked him running out of food. It was already almost autumn, with winter quickly approaching. There would be a lot of other concerns that he will need to prepare for, as well. That can't be possible. Well, he was just born lucky. Having good luck when it comes to girls, I'm sure that he has his mouth open like a creep, drunk on his own popularity. I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. Quote ellipsis ellipsis quote. Belle didn't respond as she clenched her fist, leaving Clara to continue with her story. Well, sometimes it was enough of a relief to just vent to someone else about your issues and worries. Belle closed her eyes as she thought about Ed's situation. Right now, it looked like he was struggling to survive. Would it really be a situation for him to be enjoying his luck when it came to girls? Considering all of that, she gave him a silent prayer. Ultimately, when she thought about all the girls around that boy, she could only think of them as cats and other animals. Lortel Kehaland was like a feisty stray cat, sitting in front of a fish shop. Yennecar Polarover was like an innocent kitten, trembling in fear in front of a tiger. Lucy, well, she was just a cat. Either way, she could clearly see Ed struggling amongst all of those girls as she tried to give him some encouragement that would never reach him. It seemed that she needed to take some time to go and visit Ed's camp. She wanted to check it out, seeing that Clara was worried to such an extent, but there was also a message she needed to deliver from headmaid Alice. Though, it was not good news. It had been a while since the weather was so good. I went over to the stream next to the camp to wash my face and decided to check my life skills. Life skills details. Grade: Intermediate Craftsman. Specialized fields: Woodworking, Handicraft LVL 13. Design LVL 8. Collecting skills LVL 11. Woodworking LV 12. Hunting LV 8. Fishing LV 6. Cooking LV 6. Repairing LV 5. Less than advanced production technique slot. Empty greater than. Less than advanced production technique slot. Empty greater than. Since the advanced production technique slots were currently empty, acquiring a new technique that I could use was of the highest priority. I'd already decided on what skills I was going to learn. I planned to start learning spiritual infusion, which has a good compatibility with elementalists, as well as magic engineering, which would be great for making daily necessities and other types of combat-related equipment. Spiritual infusion was acquired automatically once you made a contract with a spirit and produced a product that contained elementalism. Magic engineering, on the other hand, was acquired once you succeed in dismantling and assembling a magically engineered item of a certain level. Compared to combat-type skills and magic-type skills, the methods to acquire them were quite simple and quick. That was the benefit of production-type skills. I didn't want to waste a spirit slot unnecessarily, but if I wanted to start training spiritual infusion in advance, it would be better to just make a contract with a low-ranking spirit immediately. In that case, I thought it would be better for me to make it with a spirit who was of an attribute different than mine. Earth or water spirits. If I start dealing with spirits properly, then I'd start to increase my spirit-type skills proficiency quickly. Then, once my magic-type stats were able to support me, the day that I could make a contract with a high-ranking spirit would come sooner than expected. In that regard, it might have been better to go and get some help from Yennecar. My body condition wasn't great. I couldn't push my body too far doing things that required a lot of work. In other words, because of the occupation of Ophelis Hall incident, I ended up pushing myself too far. Because of that, when it came down to labor-intensive work, I couldn't do much of it. Well, what can you do? It was a necessary sacrifice. Reaper scans. Translator, Plumper, Proofreader, Harley. In any case, I was able to prevent Lortel, one of the main characters of the storyline, from leaving. The plan seemed to have worked to some extent, given that there had been no significant response from Elt yet. The rest needed to be fought out back at Eltie's headquarters, so the only thing we could do was wait for the situation to play itself out and wait for good news from the homing pigeon, which would eventually fly back. "Hi, Ed, now that the rain has stopped, the weather has gotten a bit chilly." "Oh. Hey, Yennecar." Quote, Yennecar still visited the camp every day. It was great, as she would bring all sorts of food ingredients with her. "Is Lortel doing okay?" "Yeah. She's just resting in the cabin." Quote, I told Yennecar the entire story. After explaining Lortel's situation to her and how she had to be in hiding for a while, Yennecar had nodded her head and accepted that fact. After that, she started coming over to see if she was okay every single day. However, it was already the start of school and the second semester's curriculum was already underway. Lortel had no intention of going to class until her safety was ensured, and since my uniform was a wreck, I ended up borrowing Zig's. However, I needed to adjust it to fit me. It would be really difficult to attend class until I was able to finish fixing it. So Lortel and I weren't able to go to class until our situation got better. Yennecar, on the other hand, had no such reason. And yet, she still came by the camp every day to sit down and read her magic textbooks. "Yennecar, you're not going to class." My head hurts and my condition isn't all that great, so I'm just going to rest here in the northern forest and enjoy the breeze." I already told the professors, and they just told me to take care of myself. Quote, "Really? You didn't get hurt while trying to help me, right?" "No way. Definitely not. You should just do what you need to do. I'm just going to sit here enjoying nature, then head back when it's time." Quote, even though Yennecar said that, she didn't seem to be in any sort of pain. She sat down on a wooden stool by the campfire the entire day, reading her book. She would also sometimes glare at the cabin, almost like she was surveying it. It seems that Yennecar didn't fully trust Lortel quite yet. That was understandable. After all, Lortel's past was something quite special. "I see, Ed. Well, it's a shame that you can't explain the details of the situation to me, but at least I was able to pay off my debt." Quote, as the sun went down, I was off chopping firewood when Ziggs came by to ask about the situation from the previous night and help me out. I gave him a brief explanation of the story, and answered the questions he asked me. "Well, it seems that they can't really tell that we destroyed part of Ophelis Hall. The building was already half destroyed in the first place, so it wasn't obvious that we destroyed part of it." Quote, what about the disciplinary actions against the students? Most of it was put on that upperclassman, Willain, as well as some other students who were dealt a minor punishment. The head maid is still being interrogated, but it doesn't seem like she's opening her mouth. Quote, seeing as there was no mention of Lortel, Alice must have been staying silent. She couldn't hastily confess without knowing if Lortel or Elt was going to win. Once it was safe, she would probably try and secretly make contact as fast as possible. "All right. Anyway, this time I owe you." Quote, what are you talking about? "Next time as well, make sure to let me know if you need anything. I'll be heading out now." Quote, Ziggs waved at me as he left. I dropped the axe I was holding next to me and let out a deep sigh. It was probably better that Lortel stayed hidden in the cabin. I could just keep on sharing food with her, and once some time passed and we heard news of our victory, we could both return back to our normal lives. I hoped there wouldn't be any major accidents before then. I sat down in the middle of the forest to take a break, smelling the breeze of the upcoming fall, hoping for a peaceful time. Most of my wounds had healed, so they weren't bothering me too much anymore. The quiet atmosphere inside the cabin calmed her down. Lortel sat, leaning against the rough wall, quietly waiting for time to pass by. Although the occupation of Ophelis Hall incident had come to an end, there was still a lot of work left for her to do. The first thing was to win over the former maid Alice again. The rumors going around said that the head maid Alice was keeping her mouth shut in front of the investigators. As she couldn't tell who the winner would be between Lortel and Elt, she was going to stay quiet until she knew for sure. The second thing was to lay the groundwork for the negotiations on the purchase of the sage's seal. Elt losing his position had ended up happening earlier than expected, but since there was still an opportunity to purchase the sage's seal, she couldn't waste it. Once the plan was established, Lortel's position in the Elt company would be one of the most influential. Even the head wouldn't be able to touch her easily. Even though she was quite busy, she couldn't do anything about it unless she could quickly fly over to the headquarters. Though, by living in the northern forest, she first had to make sure that she was completely safe before she could head back to take classes as a student of Sylvania. She should have been a bit frustrated at having to quit her life as a merchant and stay in the cabin for the next 3 days or so, despite being so busy. However, her heart was warm knowing that Ed came to check on her often, making sure she wasn't inconvenienced in any way. It wasn't all that bad, considering the fact she had lived a splendid life full of luxury before suddenly moving into a cabin in the wilds, though, she was sure that it was all thanks to that boy she was with. Her heart would beat fast sitting down next to Ed Rothstaylor. His unconditional goodwill and unrequited trust made her feel like she was snuggled in a fluffy bed. For some that was only natural, but for Lortel, who had lived her entire life on a cold, distant path, that feeling was more precious than gold. It went without saying, but she didn't want to give him up to anyone else. Especially that person. Yennecar Polarover. A girl who had lived her life like a protagonist in a fairy tale. To her, a relationship with unconditional goodwill and trust must have been oh so natural and common. Whether it was her friends or family, they would all support her. To Lortel, though, that man was a luxury. A heartwarming relationship, where she knew that he would never betray her. For Yennecar, he was no more common than a pebble on a street. If she had that many, she should at least give up this one. Lortel had thought she was too cruel, and couldn't understand her at all. Being like that, the only thing left was to fight dirty. Unfortunately for Yennecar, that was Lortel's specialty. Not just that, but spending 3 days with him was such a massive and perfect advantage for her. However, how would their relationship as a man and woman progress? She had taken the initiative in human relationships countless times before, but she didn't know if it would work the same way in a more affectionate relationship between man and woman. That was right. She had been living her life thus far in a brutal business world, where she had to weigh humans by interests alone. That was why she didn't have any knowledge about how a romantic relationship between a man and woman developed. Unexpectedly, this is something I suck at, Lortel thought, as she tried to view herself objectively. It was unlike her usual self. Let's just do it my way. Quote, she kept on saying those words to herself as she decided to do things her own way. After all, the easiest way to gain someone's favor was with money. If she buried his shabby cabin with gold coins, then wouldn't he look at her with sparkling eyes anyways? But I'm short on money. Even so, she was still in the middle of reaching out to various businesses. It would affect Lortel's personal assets as well. Still, selling a villa in the mine region or a certificate of land on the outskirts would have a similar performance. However, when she imagined Ed Rothstaylor's eyes full of childish greed, she shook her head. In the end, since it would be a relationship formed out of money, there wouldn't be any sense of affection. Thinking of seeing him look at her with such eyes, smiling only for his own greed, broke her heart. But even then, it wasn't right to sit around and do nothing. Just by watching Ed throughout the day, she could tell that he was living a hellish life. Without wasting a single minute, or even a single second, he clenched his teeth and struggled to survive. Before her selfish desire to be favored and loved, she also felt a sense of affection, a desire to help him. But on the other hand, she was worried that it might be looked at as pity, and thus would eventually lead to a relationship made out of money. Lortel sat down, cross-legged, as she scrunched her toes. Isn't it okay to help with his tuition? If she gave him that much money, That wouldn't be too much like pity, right? Being a girl who had never given a favor without a cost in the first place, she couldn't even imagine what she should say or how to give him the money. Some examples of the lines she came up with while thinking on it were: Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not just giving this to you because you're my upperclassman. Single quote. Lortel cringed as she curled her hands and kicked the wall of the hut. She was embarrassed by those lines, but for some reason they felt very natural to her. Didn't she live a life hidden under a mask, with a fox-like smile hiding her dark inner intentions and ideals? Now, even in such a ridiculous situation, she couldn't take off that mask and show her face. Taking a deep breath, she regained her composure. She straightened out the thoughts in her head as she thought about how to get through to him in a seductive, desirable manner. Quote quote. In the first place, if you wanted to watch how and where a relationship between a man and woman crossed the line, it was just a matter of waiting and observing. Anyway, at that moment Ed didn't see Lortel as a woman in the slightest. The development of a relationship would eventually stem from a change of perception. The first course of action would be to change his perception of her. Lortel thought up that plan in her mind as she nodded her head, as if she had decided on what to do. It was impossible to realize at that point just how ridiculous that plan was. As said before, Lortel was good when it came down to controlling or shaking up someone's mind. But when it came to simple and affectionate relationships, which she was awful in, even Yennecar was years ahead of her. Then, specifically, I will need to. However, it would take time to come up with a specified plan of action. For the next 3 days she would be hiding out in the cabin, so she had plenty of time to think it over. She thought that, as long as she planned it out carefully, she would be able to beat Yennecar in no time at all. With a sly smile, Lortel hugged her knees. Can you move over? You're in my spot. Quote. However, there was an unexpected event. A new girl had arrived. Yawn. She was familiar with that large witch's hat, the school uniform with long sleeves, pigtails that easily came down past her waist to her butt. Someone that she would often meet in Professor Glast's class, and one of the 3 students in Class A. Just when did she enter the cabin? When did she come in from the roof? And when did she learn spatial-type magic? The girl whose movements were impossible to predict, and who would always make the people around her bewildered. Lucy, what are you doing here? This is the best place. It's where the sun shines down the best. Quote. She then pushed Lortel away as she threw some marten skin down on the floor, pressed on it hard, and then laid down on top of it. She then fell asleep peacefully, arms wrapped around herself. Quote. Quote. In a moment of complete confusion, Lortel wiped her face. Just what's with this girl? __________.